Hello friends, I am Chevee. Welcome to my shed. How are you today? How's life in your world? How's things where you are? I hope it's fantastic. How was your weekend? I hope good. Everything's good here. Um, we did a lot of softball stuff this weekend, but maybe we'll talk about that tomorrow. Um, Last week, was it last week? Yeah. I did a video talking about my reading speed and whether do I read too much, or do I read too quickly? Am I robbing myself of enjoy? Am I not absorbing the material well enough while reading? So, according to Goodreads, after this past weekend, I have read 43 books. I would say at least 8 of the things that are listed as books on here are short stories. They're like 1 hour reads, like 20 pages kind of things. I don't really consider that to be like a book, but whatever. 43 books. That doesn't count, let's see, it's April. That doesn't count the 6 literary magazines that I read. I subscribe to a few horror magazines, that sort of thing. And I don't know how many other short stories that I've read that were not on those magazines, but maybe were on Reactor or something like that. So I've read a lot. And I have read all of those. Not listened to. I haven't listened to anything that I've claimed as reading. Because for the longest time, I have held the position that listening is not reading. And I still do. I still think they're two separate things. And people who say, I read 100 books last year, like, did you, or did you listen to 100 books last year? Because that's very, very, very different. Most people that I know who herald or who praise audiobooks praise them because they can listen while they're doing something else. And what I would say is, well, then are you actually listening? That was my argument. Are you actually listening? Are you taking in the material? What I've found is, myself, I do listen to things. I don't listen to audiobooks. I can't stay with a narrative for that long while listening. Because, similar to me reading quickly, I don't retain enough of the information because my brain is free to go do other stuff. The reason people like audiobooks. I can listen to an audiobook while I work in the shop or whatever. Well, are you really doing either? Because I don't really think that multitasking like that works. And from my experience, I listen to a decent amount of audio drama podcasts, true crime podcasts, story podcasts, that the information that I retain from the podcasts that I listen to is very similar structurally to the information that I retain from reading a book too quick. They're very different things. For me, sitting down to read is one of the few times where I get to just unplug and I pour myself into the material. I am reading word for word. I'm not skimming. I'm taking in sentences. I'm parsing meaning. I'm, sometimes having to decipher meaning because the sentence is in a weird structure or whatever. But I'm fully engaged in the experience of reading, to the point that my family will be like trying to talk to me or whatever, and I'm just not engaging with them because I'm reading this book. Whereas when I'm listening, I'm very rarely fully engaged in the listening. Sometimes there are times when I will put a podcast on and then just close my eyes and put all of my attention onto hearing. And those are generally podcasts that are, providing valuable information or whatever. But for me, I find that listening provides close to the value that I get from reading a book too quickly. And so maybe I should give it another shot. But again, even if I'm to get that value, I have to do it in very small chunks, which for a long narrative, a book that's going to take 5, 6, 10, 12, sometimes the fantasy books can be 20 some hours to get through. I won't remember an hour down the road what I've already listened to the half hour before that. And so I just can't do it. It's really, unless it's a book I know. We've talked about this before. I could listen to The Lord of the Rings. In fact, I have. I could listen to The Hobbit. I have. I could listen to Harry Potter. I have. There are books that I know and enjoy that I can listen to and I can engage with them because I already know the book. I know it intimately. I know it well. And so listening to it just reinforces my understanding and sometimes gives me new perspectives because maybe the narrator reads a sentence in a way that with inflection that I wasn't putting into that sentence, or with their voice provides some nuance that I didn't read into the text. And I can appreciate that. I can especially appreciate when there's multiple actors doing, like, not necessarily a dramatic reenactment, but giving voice to characters so that I can understand who's who, because sometimes books don't really make it clear who's talking and you kind of have to, suss that out through context. But I still stand by the idea that listening and reading are very different things. And when I say I read books, I read books. If I listen to books, I say I listened to that book. But I find that most people don't do that. Most people say, I read this book. And then they'll say, it was this narrator. Well, you listened to this book. Because I think that's a very different thing. And I'm just curious to know what your thoughts are on that. So, yeah. I think this goes hand in hand with the discussion we had last week about reading too fast, at least. They both provide similar things to me, similar value to me. Curious to know, are you able to retain as much information from listening as you are from reading? And I recognize for some people, reading has become either a chore or something that they can't sit and fully invest themselves in, and so listening provides them a way to enjoy those stories without having to invest their own, mental processes in the same way. And that's great. I mean, read however you feel like reading. I'm not trying to say that listening isn't reading. For me, listening is not the same thing as reading. Now you say something. Put it in the comments. Call me, text me, whatever. Thank you for being here as always. Thank you for liking, commenting, subscribing, being amazing friends and wonderful people. I really appreciate you. And I'll see you again tomorrow. Today's word you should know sounds smart is utopia. It's announcing a perfect or ideal society. Many of us who are accustomed to wealth have learned to accept that we must make our own utopias rather than rely on the actions of outside forces or agencies. Utopia. U-T-O-P-I-A. Dude, what? This is a whole list of words that are not particularly smart or unknown or whatever. Just a regular old word.